the Cannon Sports Podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by the head coach of the Sherman Oaks Notre Dame basketball program, Matt Sargeant. Welcome everybody to the Cannon Sports Podcast. I'm Phil George, and today we're at Sherman Oaks Notre Dame High School, and joining us today on the show is the head coach of the Notre Dame High School basketball program, Coach Matt Sargeant.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, and this is your second time on the show, but for those out there who may have missed the first one, who are you? Let us know who you are.
Oh, wow. So I'm the head coach of boys basketball at Notre Dame High School, California native, playing since I was 5, coaching varsity basketball for 11 years, and this is my 6th year at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and wanted to start off the show this week by kind of following up on a conversation that we had with last week's guest, Paul Tate, the head coach at Heritage Christian, and kind of a similar background that I wanted to touch on. So, like him, you were born and raised in Southern California, spent some time in the Northeast, played your college ball at Princeton. He coached at Springfield, and then now you guys are both head coaches for very successful programs in the San Fernando Valley. So, the question that I want to ask you about, he and I spoke at length about the deep, rich history of basketball in the Northeast, as well as the massive amount of talent here in Southern California. One point that he brought up was that California boasts the most NBA players out of any, NBA players who went to high school in California of any state. So you've both experienced the basketball culture on both coasts. He described it at length. What's your perspective on having experienced that, and how would you compare and contrast the two?
It's a really good question. Stylistically, there are a bunch of differences. What was interesting at my time at Princeton is at any given time, about 30 to 40% of the roster were California kids, either Northern or Southern California.
Even all the way in New Jersey?
Yeah. So I think, in my class alone, there's a kid from Harvard Westlake, and then there are 2 kids from De La Salle. There's another kid from Archbishop Mitty. So, there's a bunch of California kids. But that just speaks to the talent level that California has. That, even then, they're going to be traveling to the Ivy League. But I think the way I would describe it is, and how I've always described it, is it's very, very similar to the weather. Kids on the East Coast have an attitude and a toughness that you can only get by having to experience supreme cold for 3 to 4 months out of the year. And sort of like what goes into having to continue to work on your game in cold weather, to just live in cold weather. There's a grittiness and a toughness that just California players we don't have to deal with. We have other things to deal with, but that is, like, stylistically speaking, and also just sort of personality speaking, is the biggest differences in contrast. And it's why most East Coast schools, college-wise, don't really recruit that much out here. Princeton and Ivy League schools are unique because there's such a niche player they have to get, because academically and athletically they have to fit. So they can't they have to be pretty specific in their choices. But for a school like Villanova or the schools in the Big East, they really have to recruit their area, because it takes a special kind of kid to leave the West Coast to be successful on the East Coast, just from a specific weather standpoint.
Now, that's interesting that would apply to basketball as well. Obviously that makes sense in a sport like football that is by and large played outdoors. Of course, you have some indoor stadiums. I definitely understand that vibe, having grown up here, and I spent 4 years at college, not as an athlete, if you couldn't tell, but spent my college years in Syracuse, upstate New York, where it was negative 20 degrees in the winter. So yeah, I definitely get the shock there, but that's interesting that applies to basketball, which is largely played indoors.
Well, think about it. The sport itself is played indoors, but it's a winter sport, right? So you're going through the ups and downs of a season, and any season's going to have ups and downs. And if I have a bad practice or multiple bad practices, and I live in California, I walk outside, it's sunny outside, it's warm, kind of feels good. I have a bad practice at Princeton, and I walk outside, and it's 20 degrees and windy.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky, it's just, if I'm not used to it, it hits you different. Mm-hmm. And and you have to have some sort of toughness and resolve to process it. And so that's more what I'm talking about, is being used to that, being able to call that kind of toughness upon yourself to handle playing a winter sport during a real winter. That's what I meant by sort of a stylistic difference. It's more of a mental thing than actual, the basketball playing.
Sure. And compared out here?
Yeah, I mean, like there's just the stereotype about California players being laid back, being, highly skilled because we can really, it's not so much the same as now as it was 20 years ago, but, easier for us to work on our games year round because, of the weather difference. But like there is always this sense of people on the East Coast look at California players and call us soft. That is like at any level, high school, college, even, in the pros, someone coming from California has to fight the label and the stereotype of being soft. And that's not to say that we're not tough. It's just in comparison to East Coast or even kids from the South and the Midwest who have to deal with, weather and just the different cultural aspects as well.
Yeah, and I guess that also can partially explain the weather aspect of it, why so many of the top recruits come from the southeast region of the United States as well. And you just picked up a pair of those guys that transferred into this program from the southeast region. We'll get to a little bit more of them later, but yeah, I guess by that logic, that makes sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into what creates a talent hotbed, what I would really call it. And it seems silly to say it's the weather, but like it does play a role.
Sure.
And I mean, it's different. I mean, if you talk to players that grew up and played basketball in the 70s and the 80s, like there used to be this sort of stereotype that, guards from New York couldn't shoot. And the reason is that like they're playing outdoors in the wintertime dealing with the elements. And so like you had to get to the cup, like you had to be able to drive. Like there was no shooting outdoors. And so, California schools, it's sunny all the time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. I mean, like there's always going to be outliers. But like a lot of phenomenal skilled shooters have come from the West Coast. I mean, just in the Palisades alone have produced like 3 or 4 of the better shooters in NBA history.
Sure.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit ago about the benefit of being able to develop your game year round, and that is a perfect segue into the next topic, which is the AAU circuit. That's been a big part of the evolution of basketball nationwide, but especially out here on the West Coast. The ability to play organized, competitive basketball year-round benefits athletes both from a developmental standpoint and also from an exposure standpoint. A lot of these teams, a lot of these leagues are highly, highly prominent, even more than some of the top high school teams in the region as well. You coached on the AAU circuit at a few different age levels. Describe your experience in that world and the effect that it's had on the basketball landscape.
So my experience first, when I got into coaching, the first place I worked at was at this place called Open Gym, and it was really just kind of getting my feet wet in coaching. And so I didn't really care about the talent of the players. I just wanted to get coaching reps. And then after that, I coached for Earl Watson Elite, which is now West Coast Elite. And at the time, there was only like 2 or 3 teams, and there was a specific team that had the players on it fit the mold of what I guess you would call like high academic kids. There are kids, 3.8 to 4.4 GPAs, where most of them are going to be in the Ivy League or Division III high academic realm. So I was coaching that team, and that was a very fun experience. And then after that, like I stopped coaching AAU. I never really dipped my toes into the sort of the EYBL or the Adidas circuit or the UA circuit. So I've only ever really experienced it through my players playing in it. I think there can be a really good marriage between high-level high school basketball and AAU basketball when it's done right, and there can be sort of an adversarial aspect of it if it's done wrong. And I'm speaking more about sort of how we want American basketball to look, how we want to develop American basketball players. What makes me happy to see, especially in Southern California, is a lot of the great high school coaches out here are coaching AAU. I hope that continues. I do, because the worst thing for a high school coach is your player leaving you for 2 months, going to play for an AAU team, and the coaching is not the level that you want to be at, and you get them back, and they've gotten bad habits, either not just with their on-court stuff, but with what's going on in their head. And so much of coaching is trying to manage kids' emotions and mindset. And so, you give a kid to another coach for a couple months, you want to sort of make sure that there's an alignment there. But that is what, in order for development to be consistent, there has to be an alignment in the values and the kind of basketball that we want to be played, both high school and AAU. If it's different, then like kids are going to get mixed messages, and we're not going to develop kids the way we want.
So that's obviously one component of that quality marriage that you talked about between high school basketball and the AAU circuit. Aside from that, in your ideal world, what does the rest of that marriage look like, and what is the ideal way to develop players in a system where they're playing year round?
Oh, that's a really good question. Personally, I think kids are playing too much basketball. So I
appreciate the honesty.
No. But by the time if I get a high level kid coming into my program as a freshman or a sophomore, like they have already played travel basketball and travel schedules that look like kind of what we're doing this year at the varsity level. And it's why so many kids, by the time they get to college, like get burned out really quick. So I in a perfect world, I wouldn't have these, I would reduce the amount of, because listen, there has to be a good amount of the top players playing against each other in games that matter. And that's the key. Like, these games need to matter. If you play 4 games every weekend, 4 games, 3 weekends a month over the course of 12 months, like the games start to not have any sort of urgency, because you're going to get 2 more. You're playing 2 more on Sunday. And so the urgency to be great on defense, the urgency to be, take care of the ball, like you lose that because I'm going to play 8 more games. I'm not to say it was perfect when I was growing up. When I was growing up, not a lot of kids played club. It was really one of the best kids, and the only tournaments that we played were over holiday weekends, because it's the only time you could guarantee the families would be able to not have work, right? So you'd play on Thanksgiving, you'd play on Christmas, and then maybe you have like a Saturday league where like the top 3 teams would just play like a round robin thing, and that was it. And that was plenty, because you were playing enough that you were getting it, like, hey man, like I'm only going to play this team like once. I'm not going to play them again, for a couple months, and I need to show what I can do, because it's going to be lasting memory. This game's gonna be lasting memory for a while, and then you only play 1 tournament every like 2 or 3 weeks. So maybe there's something in the middle, but I just know that we're seeing overuse injuries, we're seeing kids get burnt out. Like coming up into high school, I wish there was more focus on the reduction of games, a little more focus on some fundamental training aspects. Although I also think kids are overtrained, so maybe it's like reducing some amount of that as well. I have a son. If my son decides that he's going to be an athlete, like he will play multiple sports until he's in the 8th grade. Like all the research shows that from a skill development standpoint, that's the best thing for him. And then once you get to high school, like, I think it's important. I'm going to get a little bit off a tangent here. When I was playing, there wasn't an EYBL, there wasn't an Adidas, not everyone played club. And I think that there needs to be a sense of what is realistic for kids in terms of what college basketball really looks like for them, and how much you really love and how much you're willing to give your life to be a college basketball player. And, it's not for everyone. It's not even for everyone that's good enough to play at that level. And so, as these kids are working so hard, spending so many hours trying to be college basketball players, there are some kids like very much like they're good enough. They're on EYBL teams, they should be playing. Other kids are kind of in between going, but like the commercialization, commodification of AAU, where like everyone's playing club basketball, I don't think is healthy. Like we want to live in a society where we're creating the idea that we want whole people. We don't want people being identified by one thing, except for the people that like are good enough to be identified by one thing. And that's a very, very small percentage of people. There's only been 4,000 players in the history of the NBA. That's it.
Wow.
4,000. That's not a lot.
That's not a lot when you put it in those terms.
No, that's since 1950s, 4,000 people. So, I think that we need to spend more attention on, developing the whole person and not just putting all of our eggs in this basket of it's like you have to be a basketball player and you have to be playing year round. Like for some kids, yeah, for sure. For other kids, like get into some other stuff and sort of figure out like what could be other realms that you're going to be successful in.
Yeah, and that's very much in line with a lot of the coaches that we've talked to on the football side of things. You know, they really encourage their players not only to get involved in other sports. You know, most of them swear by track and field. Get involved with track. Get involved with another sport. But also exactly that, making sure have a life outside of this gym. Have a life outside of this program, because number one, I mean, you need it for your sanity, and number two, you may very well not go on to play in college. You may very well not go on to play in the NBA. You're gonna have to figure out what else you like at some point.
Correct. Yeah, and I was one of those kids. Like, I worked harder than anyone. At the same time, I knew I was gonna be an NBA player. Like, that's why I chose to go to Princeton instead of going and play basketball at Long Beach State. And when I was at Princeton, like, I dipped my toes in many things because I knew the ball would stop bouncing at some point. I mean, I found my way back here as a coach, but anyway. Yeah,
you did some multimedia production.
I did. Right? Yeah, for sure. I was I ran a social media marketing advertising department for a gaming company back when no one knew what social media advertising was supposed to be. So I was kind of making it up as a...
Wow, what year was this?
2011.
Oh, okay, so that was,
it was literally the year that Facebook started running ads.
Yeah.
So I was kind of making it up as I was going along. I mean, there were systems in place that just hadn't been done on those platforms yet. So you were taking one system that was being used in print media or other kinds of media, then putting into social media. But yeah, interesting.
Well, I hope when we promote the show on Instagram, we do right by you and get a ton of views.
I hope so. That'd be nice. For your sake, not about my sake.
That's right. Before we get into the program here at Notre Dame, I want to touch on one more point that you made a little bit ago in the conversation about AAU ball and college ball, and you said that there's somewhat of a disconnect between what certain athletes think college ball is going to look like and what it actually is. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you find?
This could be a whole podcast, and maybe it should. Basketball players to me fit in two buckets. The first bucket is the basketball players that love basketball when they get to do the things they like to do on the basketball court. And then the other bucket is people that love basketball, full stop. College basketball is really only made for the second bucket. If you go into college, coming out of high school where you were the man, you got to do all these things, and then you get there and you can't do all the things that you like to do, and you don't really love it, and you don't really stick into your routine, and you're not going to make it. It is, tell us, I've had these conversations with Ben. We'll talk about Ben later on going into Creighton, and we have these conversations all the time about sort of how to make it in college basketball, the kind of mental attitude you have to have, how much love you have to have for it, and, we text almost every day, and he just keeps saying, you're right. Like, if you don't love hoop, college basketball will beat you up.
And he does seem like a guy who
loves
ball.
But even he's going through it in his own way, as most freshmen do. And I mean this to as much as I can. That is true regardless of the level. In fact, I would even argue that at a lower level, Division III, the love needs to be even higher, because there are amenities at Division I that, if you want, can help you sort of stay with the love. There's no amenities in Division III. So if you go Division III, one, those guys are still good, and all the fanfare, all those amenities, the crowd are not there. So if you don't really love it, and those guys are in scholarship, you're not going to make it. So I think the misconception about college is that everyone sees the pageantry of the NCAA tournament, everyone sees the commercialization and the crowds and, the marketing of the Division I experience, where the day-to-day, it is one of the harder things being in Division I, just being a college athlete that you're ever going to have. I think getting kids to understand that if you don't love it, I mean, every aspect of it, you're not going to make it. If you only like basketball when you get to do things you want to do, it's going to be the worst experience that you could possibly imagine, because there's only a handful of guys that in a college program, the way college basketball teams are run, that just get all this freedom. Just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, and this is obviously something that you feel very strongly about, that you're very opinionated about. I'm sure that over the years you found a way to communicate that to your players as well. Do they seem to get it?
No one gets it till you're in it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's some things that can't be understood till you experience it. And, you know, just talking about Ben, like Ben's an extremely smart kid. We had many conversations about it. And even he was like, you know, I didn't really understand it until, you know, I'm here. And he didn't play in his first game. And there was that first game he didn't get in. It's like, oh, wow, that's his first experience not playing. You know, like that can kind of trip you up. Now
you go from being the star player in a league like this to suddenly you're a freshman coming off the bench.
Yep, and that's testament to him. Like, he's played well since, and like Ben will be just fine. But for, you know, a lot of kids, it is extremely difficult to sort of have to augment your identity in a way that is going to be beneficial for the team, keep you in a stable place mentally, while at the same time dealing with all of the things that most college freshmen struggle with who are not athletes. There's a stat, I think it's 37% of college freshmen transfer.
That's
students,
not just athletes.
Yeah, 37%.
Wow.
Transfer.
Yeah, I almost transferred my freshman year.
It's hard. You're away from home. There's all these things, and then on top of that, you know, you got some coach like cursing at you and yelling at you and calling you all the things. And, you know, in high school you may have gotten that, but you were getting to play. So it's different when someone's screaming and yelling at you, and then you get to play. Now it's different when someone's screaming and yelling at you, and you're on the bench watching. So, I've found the best way to tell kids just to be honest with them. But I know that I had people telling me these things when I was a player, and I didn't really understand it till I was experiencing it. And I started as a freshman, so I didn't even really get to experience it until I got hurt and I came back and I wasn't playing. So, and, you know, it's again, you have to really, really love it, and not just for the things that you like to do.
Well, and that's also got to be a little bit frustrating from the standpoint of a coach, you know, being able to sit there with the knowledge and experience you have and saying, okay, I know this, you don't know this, you're gonna figure it out eventually, but you're not going to listen to me, and you're only going to figure it out once you get there.
I mean, to be fair, like, they're listening. Like, you know, Ben and Dusty, like, you know, we're very close, and they trust me. Like, it's just one of those things that you just can't really understand what I'm talking about until you're experiencing it. You know, it's like trying to explain, like, someone what it's like to love someone else. You know what I mean? And, like, they'll hear the words I'm saying, and they'll understand it conceptually, but until you, like, love someone and you know what it feels like to, oh, this is unconditional, like, I'll love you no matter what, like, until you have that relationship
and you think you experience it, but it's not really that, and then
so I mean, they both Ben and Dusty chose their college choices in large part to all the conversations that we had, and I think that's the best that I can do is, as a coach, as they're choosing these schools. And we have some younger players here that'll be doing the same thing, is that I share this knowledge with them. I let them know, like, this is what you're choosing. Because normally when I'm giving advice, when they're there, they're texting me and they're struggling, I'm like, just a reminder, you chose this. This is something you asked for. The grass is going to be greener where you water it. It's never it's not green on the other side. It's going to be green where you water it. So you're there, water it. So that's the best I can do.
Well, let's get specifically into your coaching tenure here at Notre Dame. You took over this program prior to the 2017-18 season, and within a couple of years led the team to its first 20-win season in more than 2 decades. How have you been able to keep elevating this program to the point where you're now consistently ranked among the top teams in the nation, continually being able to place guys at top colleges and keep getting better and better every year?
I think this is a phenomenal school. So, I mean, you know, when people come here and they tour and they see the mission-style campus and, you know, they meet with the people here and they meet with the kids, like, it is a great place to go to schools. I mean, so that's kind of the first part of it. And the second part of it is, I mean, we, as a coaching staff, like, I want this to be a place that looks attractive to play in. You know, I want people that watch our team play and say, like, oh, that looks like that would be fun to play on that team, stylistically on both ends. So I think that's my goal, is that when people watch us play and watch me coach, they say, that looks like fun, and I want to play for that guy. And so far, that's worked. And then the second part is just like building relationships, because I had a coach tell me, I was talking to a coach, I won't say who it was, who has a really good freshman class. And I was like, hey, you know, how are your freshmen doing? And he goes, you know, it's good. Everyone's on a 1-year contract. and I laugh. It's true. So it's one thing to attract, and it's another thing to keep. And so part of keeping players, which we've done a pretty good job of here, is just building relationships. And the only way you can build relationships is by being brutally honest and being a man of your word. And I'd like to pride myself as someone that tells the truth. I definitely don't lie. And so I think making this a place where it looks like it's attractive to play, and I'm attracted to play for as a coach. And then when they're here, like building relationships with them as people, not just players, has been what's able to sort of stabilize us for the last few years.
Well, one thing that I also noticed about you is that you, in addition to your duties coaching here, you also teach psychology here at Notre Dame as well.
And sports broadcasting.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Your background in the field of psychology with that knowledge and, being able to teach the course, has that at all given you an advantage in forming those relationships and being able to get inside the mind of your players?
I think, one, being on campus as a teacher and getting the players to experience me as not just a coach, but as someone that is also a teacher and also just a human being is helped immensely with those relationships. And then, I haven't had a semester here in 6 years where I didn't have at least two players in the classroom with me. I've got two seniors, Dusty and Luke Nelson, in my psych class this year. So, I think that goes a long way. They get to see a different side of me, and I get to see a different side of them. I think that's really important because all people all the time are playing multiple roles. All these boys are playing the role of student, playing the role of athlete, playing the role of brother, playing the role of son, playing the role, maybe some of them are boyfriend, who knows, right? So they're all playing multiple roles, and and they all are interconnected, and they all impact one another. And so the more that we can sort of break down the walls between roles, and I can get to know you on multiple levels, the more relationship we're going to have.
So that has all resulted in a highly successful tenure on the court. Last season, you guys went 21-8, first place in the Mission League, competed in the gauntlet that was the Open Division championship for the first time, and then reached the quarterfinals of the state championship. So during your last appearance here, you obviously spoke at length about those accomplishments, but for those who may have missed it, reflect on how special a year that was before we move on to the present and the future of this program.
Yeah, that is probably, I can say this without question. And then not to besmirch my current team because we're still at the beginning of our journey.
Of course.
So I don't know how I feel at the end of the journey, but that was the most fun team that I ever coached. And it was, the end of kind of a 4-year process because that senior class was the first class that chose to play for me. And Dusty was very much a part of that class is always a year behind them, but he knew all those guys. And so they're all really, really close. And so I've never had a team that was closer on and off the court. Most teams, when they're off the court, they settle into cliques. And that team, they would all eat lunch together. They were all hanging out all the time. And they would all go out. And they were so close. And then everyone knew their role, appreciated their role, did the role the best of their ability. I have fun every time I go into the gym, just because I love what I do. But that team, every single day, everyone loved coming into the gym and just getting to be together, and it was special. And I love all those guys. And the record or any accomplishments we have could never truly reflect just how special that team was. And the only thing that could properly reflect it is what was said amongst the players in the locker room after our last loss. That's when you knew how special that team was.
Is there any of that you're able to share?
No, I won't. There's personal stuff and a lot of tears, and I won't share anything specific. But
sure, that's great. That's great though.
But it was powerful.
It's obviously impossible to talk about that outgoing senior class and the recent history of this program without mentioning Ben Stolzberg, and we've talked about him a little bit already, everything he accomplished here, and now he's at Creighton and performing pretty well. Just put up his first double-figure scoring performance, 13 points against Holy Cross. And can you put into perspective, you already talked about that senior class and how much they meant, but him specifically, how much does he mean in terms of the history of this program, and how proud are you to see him succeeding at that next level? Even if it is just 2 games in.
No, I tell everyone all the time, buy stock in Ben. his work ethic and his mental toughness is gonna lead him to be successful on the court and off the court throughout his entire life. So I'm beyond proud and not surprised. And regardless of the ups and downs he's gonna experience, when he gets to the end of his journey, like he's gonna have had a very successful career in basketball. And he is who he is because he was pushed by his classmates and by his best friend Dusty. And I think like the probably the most like in the vacuum, the most successful job that I did as a coach is evident because Ben and Dusty stayed here and became best friends and loved playing together. It didn't initially start that way. But their relationship and how it evolved and how it developed. I mean, Ben's who he is because Dusty pushed him, and Dusty is still who he is right now because Ben pushed him. And they're, personality-wise, are very different, but they learned to love each other off the court, and they learned to push each other on the court, and they wanted to go on that journey together. So, I mean, I really view them as sort of like having this symbiotic relationship and building the program. And I feel the same way about Dusty and how successful he'll be at the next level because he got to experience really developing a close relationship with someone that you're competing with in practice, but then having to play together with when you're on the court in games.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a huge boost on both sides.
Yep.
Let's talk about the state of play in this Mission League here. It's been headlined the last couple of years by you and by Harvard Westlake. You guys won the league title last year. Harvard Westlake won it the previous two. And if that wasn't enough to worry about, now you got the addition of Sierra Canyon this year. And all three of those programs are ranked in the national top 50 in the preseason. And one interesting note that we were talking about before the show, not even the Trinity League in football can say that.
It's wild.
When you play such a significant chunk of the schedule against nationally ranked competition like you do, what kind of effect does that have on your program, win or lose? I'm a Wooden guy, and we go over the pyramid of success every year. And this year I wanted to choose three specific blocks that I wanted the team to focus on. And the top block of the pyramid is competitive greatness, which is, being at your best when your best is needed, enjoyment of a difficult challenge. And so I wanted to coach at Notre Dame to be in the Mission League. And then I wanted to have the team compete for league championships. And then I knew that if we got that good, that we'd be able to play a schedule that would get us where other nationally ranked teams would want to play us. Because I don't know why you coach other than to do that. I would, me personally, if I had the team to do it, I want to play all the best teams. I don't, you know what I mean, if I can. And I'd rather, if we're playing 28 games and, 25 of them are against the best teams, I'd rather go, 18-7 than play a cupcake schedule and, win, 30 games. I want to play the best teams because why else are we doing this? And so, for us, like, I was ecstatic to find out Sierra Canyon was joining. Like, that's great. My goal is to continue to have a team that's going to actually compete against the Sierra Canyons of the world. And I want to have a program where other teams think of us like most teams think of Sierra Canyon. Now, we're nowhere near that because Sierra Canyon's been doing this, and Harvard Westlake, to be fair, has been doing this for, years. So, I think the goal is, I want to challenge my players to be competitively great, and the only way you do that is by playing the best. And so, like to your point, the Mission League, not just Harvard Westlake and Sierra Canyon, but every team is going to be a tough out. We have phenomenal coaches in our league. Like, I'm pushed to be great just going up against all these coaches, and then there's talented players on every team. So, I think you'll be surprised. Some teams that you'll be shocked will take some losses. Like, it's going to happen. Happens every year. Well, and even outside of the Mission League, we were looking over the non-league schedule, and you've got a late December matchup with San Ysidro and Mikey Williams, the number 4 recruit in the state. You've got an early January matchup with Centennial. They're number 3 in the nation. So, yeah, if competitive excellence is your thing and you want a shot at the best, you're definitely putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, and, if I didn't have a team to do that, I wouldn't play that schedule. The goal is always whatever team you have, you schedule so that they're being forced to be at their top. So, my Ben's sophomore year, Dusty's freshman year, that was a complete rebuild. Zaire had transferred, and we had mostly freshmen and sophomores. And so, we weren't ready to sort of play at that level yet, but I knew that in the following year we would be. And so, our schedule was tough, but not this tough. This team, I feel like we're able to compete at that level, so we're going to. And Centennial specifically, I mean, they are the barometer. I want to play them before the playoffs because how we play against them is going to tell me how ready we are to win a CIF championship. We played last year. That's why we played them last year. And I knew that game would be a lesson for our guys because we hadn't played that level yet.
And it probably helps to have a little bit of runway before that game and
for sure.
Play some really competitive games and really get an idea of where you stack up, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are before you go into that matchup.
Correct. And and all this is leading to we want to be league champions. We want to be in the Open Division. We want to win the Open Division. And we want to win. I mean, so all of this is in my mind getting us ready to win what, in my opinion, is the most difficult championship in high school basketball, is winning the Open Division in Southern California. I don't think there's anything more difficult than that.
Well, and you're underway to that goal. The season has started as we sit here right now. You guys are 2-0 to start the season with wins over Saugus and Agora. By the time our viewers are tuning in, there will be a weekend slate of games that will have been played. That's 2 more. Through these first couple of games and obviously a full preseason, give your early assessment of what you've seen out of this team and what viewers can expect.
Every game that we've played since the fall, we're getting better. This specific group has the least continuity of any team that I've ever coached. Between freshmen, JV players, and transfers, we're basically don't know each other. And so you're seeing exponential improvement on both ends of the floor, but we have a long way to go, which is why we played the games that we played. It's why we played the schedule we're playing, because we have high expectations for ourselves. Obviously, we didn't have Caleb or Mercy for our first 2 games. And that first game was a shock to everyone that they didn't play. So I think there's a little bit of emotional hangover is the wrong word, but I would say the guys weren't ready to step up, and so it showed. And then the second game, everyone kind of settled into that reality. I think for our team, everything is going to come down to how well we defend and rebound. Just full stop. If we defend and rebound at a high level, we're a tough team to beat. And if we don't defend and rebound at a high level, then it doesn't matter who we play, it's going to be a game.
The mantra last year was UMLC, undefeated Mission League champs, and you did end up 1 win shy of that undefeated mark, but you got the last 3 letters. You got the Mission League champs. What's the mantra this year?
ODSC.
OD, Open Division section champs?
Section or state, choose.
State champs. Yeah, why stop at the section, right?
Either one.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some of the specific players on this team, and let's start out with what I think is probably the best named big 3 in all of high school sports. We've got Run DMC, which some are referring to the combination of Dusty, Mercy, and Caleb. Obviously, got to start off with Dusty Stromer here in his senior year, 4-star commit to Gonzaga, one of the best players in the history of this program. And like you said, alongside Ben, a big part of why this program has had its successes over the last half decade. And he keeps getting better, average 20 points a game. Last season, talk about what we're expecting out of him this year.
To repeat what you said, he, in a world where most kids like him would have left, that he stayed is sort of a testament to his character and to his commitment and loyalty to this program. I in fairness to the players I haven't seen that came through here, I won't say he's the best, but in my opinion, I'll say he's the best. I'm sure to get arguments, but I think he's the best player to ever come through here, and it's just because of how impactful he is on both ends of the floor. Defends at such a high level and is so unselfish. He can score. He's getting stronger, which is the thing that he knows he's got to work on for the next level. But everything about him from a character standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. There's not a lot of guys that would stay in the program and then also accept new players and want to elevate this program with those guys. And it's a testament to him and just really just a phenomenal kid. I'm very, very close with him, and I learn as much from him as I think he would say he learns from me. And you're always blessed as a coach when your best player is such a hard worker and is really coachable. When your best player is not a very hard worker, not coachable, it's a nightmare. And so to have him for 4 years be someone that I can really point at and be like, hey, can just play as hard as that guy plays. Just, do what that guy does. He's not just because of how talented he is, but because of the way he goes about playing the game. It's just a joy to be around. I'm savoring every single day. I get to walk in the gym and watch him walk in. I'm savoring every game that I get to coach him because we're really going to miss him when he leaves.
Well, yeah, and to have a player like that who, number one, is a star caliber player on the floor, but number two, really does embody the values of the program, the way that you would like to see the game played, that kind of attitude. That's got to be a relief to you to know that when the attention's not on the players, when your back is turned, when you're worrying about other things, that's a guy that can motivate his teammates like you would and like you would want him to.
Yeah, I mean, even to take it another level, he'll tell you that he could teach the pyramid of success. So if I wasn't able to come to a team lunch for some reason and we're going to the pyramid, I could tell him, hey, I need you to go over the enthusiasm and industriousness blocks, and he'd be able to do it.
That's fantastic. Next up, we got Caleb Foster. He is one of 2 high-impact transfers that you guys got out of North Carolina, 5-star Duke commit, and I believe he might be, in terms of prospect rating, the highest-rated player to come through this program. Let's introduce the Cannon Sports viewers to Caleb.
Yeah, Caleb is as offensively gifted as a guard as I've ever seen. And again, that's saying something because I had Ben Schultzberg for 4 years. But Caleb's ball handling, his shooting, his vision, and his ability to decelerate and then accelerate is like pretty incredible to watch. He's good for at least 1 or 2 plays of practice where you're just like, what? I don't even know what just happened. I feel like the Matrix just glitched and what just took place. He's a extremely hard worker. He gets up 1,000 shots every single morning before school starts.
Literally 1,000?
Yeah. So incredibly hard worker. And he's the first kid that's ever transferred as a senior. So it's my first experience like I said earlier in the podcast, I've tried to build relationships. And so building a relationship with someone that is that new at the end of their journey, not having that much time, but he's a sweet kid, very reserved, can be quiet. Probably have to work on that when he gets to higher levels of basketball, sort of finding his voice and being comfortable using that voice. But he's been fun to coach, and I can confidently say that he's playing harder for us than he's played for anybody else in his high school career.
Mercy Miller, a year behind Caleb, but they were teammates at their previous school in North Carolina, and now he's here as well. Hasn't gotten on the floor yet. What can you share about his status?
Yeah, so hopefully he'll be on the floor sometime soon. And as a player, he is a phenomenal scorer, has a tenacity to his game and a competitiveness to his game that's fun to coach. He's committed to Houston. I think he's like the perfect Houston player because I've gotten to know that staff pretty well because they recruited Dusty for a couple years. And, Mercy fits the mold of a Houston player just in terms of how much he wants to win, how tough he is, how well he rebounds. He might have like the highest overall Q rating of anyone on our team on campus. I mean, just like everyone that comes across him just usually has nice things to say about him. Just a very charismatic, natural leader. And the 3 of them, they are extremely different personalities, all 3 of them. Kim and Dusty have some similar qualities, but they really, the Run DNC nicknames is interesting because they really do feed well off one another. And every game they play together, every practice, they're starting to learn how to feed off one another as they play. And it takes time, but it's fun watching them get to know one another and getting to see what each of them can bring to each other's games. And hopefully that peaks sometime in February.
Yeah, it's going to be real exciting to see those three when they finally get on the floor together at the same time. But obviously that's, we talked about Run DMC, but obviously you have a whole roster stacked full of talent. Who else should we watch out for in this year?
Yeah, I tell everyone that the engine of the team, or even you want to say the glue of the team, is Dante Ogbu. So Dante's a senior. He's second team All-Mission League. And, we usually go as Dante goes because Dante does all the things that show up and don't show up in the box score in terms of his defense, his rebounding, his ability to cut, make open shots when he has them. I mean, he's an incredibly hard worker. Over the course of his high school career, he's gone from 20% three-point shooter to a 40% three-point shooter, and he's willing to guard guys twice his size, and he's willing to do whatever is required of winning. And whatever school picks him up will be lucky to have him. And just he's our captain. He's just a phenomenal leader as well. Angelino Mark is a sophomore. He played for us last year. He was hurt a lot last year, but when he played, he had good minutes. He's as athletic a guard as you could possibly imagine, and wants to be great. Again, another really hard worker, but just already a phenomenal defender. It's fun watching him go up against Caleb because not many people can stay in front of Caleb, and Lino has moments where he's really staying in front of Caleb. Zach White, a freshman who has been phenomenal for us. His dad played in the NFL for 12 years, and Zach didn't start playing basketball until 2 years ago. So he's very raw, but he impacts the game on the defensive end and rebounding already as a freshman. Seniors Luke Nelson and Amari Garrett both have been with us since their sophomore years at the varsity level, and they are the consummate, perfect role players. They know their job. They do their job. They hardly make any mistakes. Amari last year saved our season. At the time we were losing to St. Anthony's. We couldn't, and this was the quarterfinals of the state, and we went 4 or 5 minutes out scoring a basket, which is something for our program. Our program usually averages in the high 70s. We just could not get a bucket, and Amari had 2 offensive rebounds in a row for buckets, one of them being a tip dunk, and it kind of the veil of not scoring kind of got lifted.
Energized.
Yeah, and so we ended up winning that game to get to the semis. But him and Luke are, like I said, just the perfect consummate role players who just know their job. They hardly make any mistakes. Jaden Harper is also going to be big for us. I think everyone usually talks about Jaden in the sense of if he rebounds, we win. And I'll say this on this podcast, if he rebounds, we're gonna win a lot of games. But he's also worked tremendously on his shot. He's shooting a lot better this year than he did last year. And as he gets tougher and rebounds the ball really well, I think any college will be happy to have him as well.
So just to ask you point blank, is this the most talented team that you've coached?
Yeah, objectively speaking, just based upon ranked guys that we have and guys that are getting recruited at the Division I level, it's objective that this is the most talented team. And I think if they can, over the course of the next few months, become as close with one another as last year's team was and find a way to sort of bake in 3 to 4 years of relationships into a few months, then they'll see the success that they want to have.
So taking a zoomed out view and then looking a little bit ahead, after 4 years of Ben, 4 years of Dusty, now Caleb and Mercy finishing out their high school careers, the younger players that we talked about a little bit earlier, it really seems like that is a program-defining era for Notre Dame and sets the tone as, number one, a true destination for elite basketball talent, and also reputation as a program that will get those guys to the next level, high-quality college programs, and hopefully with some championship hardware along the way. Given that, what do you expect the next several years to look like?
Yeah, I said it earlier in the podcast. I just want this. I want players that love basketball, not players that like basketball when they can do what they want to do, that love basketball, that want to be coached to come here. And I think as long as we're showing that we're a fun place to play and that we, like you said, develop players that play well at the next level, we'll continue to try kids. But all programs go through ebbs and flows, and right now we're growing, but exponential growth is not doesn't always happen quite like that. So I think the stability of the program is going to be based upon the values of the program and attracting families that are in alignment with those values. And I know that there are cultural and systemic changes that are happening at the youth sports level that we're going to have to adjust to, even if it's something like NIL or social media or whatever it is that, we'll have to try to stay ahead of the game and the changes so that we're able to continue to build the way that we're building. But I think I just want to continue to attract kids and families, for that matter, that are in alignment with the values of the program, the values of the school. And I think if we can continue to do that, then we'll continue to put products on the court that are positive, and we'll continue to have kids leave our program and be successful when they leave.
You seem to be having a lot of fun so far and want to wish you the best of luck and a lot more fun and a lot more wins.
Thank you.
Head coach Matt Sargeant, Notre Dame High School, thank you so much for joining the Cannon Sports Podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you as always, and thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Cannon Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow on Instagram at Cannon Sports, TikTok at Cannon Sports Official, and of course, cannonsports.com for all your sporting goods needs.